So let me back up to the awakening journey, what it looks like. Okay. So, it depends on outside looking in and me in retrospect of my own life. What your awakening journey looks like really depends on what generation you were born into. If you were born into earlier generations, like born in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, your awakening journey had a lot of intensity with it. Okay. That means life explosions, tragic events, major trauma dramas, accidents, illnesses, deaths, really like sticking your finger in that spiritual lightning socket over and over again. And even though we had a really adverse or strong response to spitting, putting our finger in the spiritual lightning socket, there was something inside of us that kept us from to continue to do it, even though we know that our life is about to explode afterwards, right? So there's like this level of I guess of suffering that we were prepared for or conditioned by. We were there's a lot of levels of pain and trauma that we've gone through as part of our awakening journey, and it was because there was a calling that we couldn't say no to, and we just kept doing it, and we started to get kind of used to the intensity. And so early generation awakenings are a lot different than the younger generation awakenings. And I'm learning a lot by connecting in with the communities here. The community here is there's a lot of young people in this community. I'm going to say, when I say young people, I'm talking about 35 and under that are awake and are entrepreneurial and have this aim to be outside the matrix, or not be controlled by the matrix at the very least. They really want to have a liberated lifestyle and be in charge of their own bandwidth and focus. Across the board, the people here usually have a really strong pranayama practice or some kind of spiritual practice. Okay, it's across the board. It's a pretty consistent thing. So the younger generations are going to have a very different awakening journey than those of us who've been around for a while. And you might ask why? Why is it like that? And really what I have to say about that is because we were born into a lot more density. The matrix, so to speak, the collective grids, so to speak, were a lot more locked down than they are now. Okay. And a lot of us had no choice but to, we just had the tools that we had to bust through, and we were busting through really hard stuff. So that required a lot of facing, deep, painful things, either in the family or within ourselves, stuff like this, because our ego drivers and the collective field supported a really dense ego driver. And of course, you know, um, being an indigo, an early generation indigo, was not an easy thing. Now, and being an indigo, it's like you're kind of born with a level of autonomy, sovereignty, and ease that didn't exist 20 years ago. Okay. So I'm saying this all for those of us who've been around for several decades. It's like this is where we can see all of that hard work paying off by us sticking to our truth and speaking the hard, speaking the hard truth and facing ourselves over and over and over again. Yes, we're doing that for our own personal healing and awakening and empowerment, but because we did that, the entire collective of this planet is benefiting. So in that way, we are very lucky because we get to see the fruits of our labor while we're still alive. Okay. And let that sink in. And there's a few of you I'm thinking of, and I know you probably can tell I'm thinking about you. Let that sink in. These future generations are benefiting from the fruits of our labor. And things were so dense and so difficult back then, we adapted survival mechanisms. And a lot of those survival mechanisms looked like extreme discipline, okay, extreme commitments, you know, things like this, where, you know, without that depth of commitment, without that depth of discipline, we would have not have had the bedrock that we needed in order to keep stepping forward, sticking to our truth. Okay. So this is why oftentimes discipline is in the conversation when it comes to spiritually awakening. And I'm seeing a lot of star seeds now that are also benefiting from discipline, but it's also something that keeps them limited, because there's this idea that the ancient ways somehow are the authentic ways. They're not quite at that place to realize that they're poised to, for when they get exposed to these ancient ways, they're poised to extrapolate the highest truth from those ways, and then adapting their lifestyle to be an expression of the truths. Okay. And I feel like in these newer generations, the word or the need for discipline is now shifting. It's not discipline now, it's about truth. So if you were to acquire some level of discipline, it would be to discipline yourself to always tell the truth. Tell the truth to yourself and tell the truth to other people. And that takes a commitment. That takes a lot of courage, because we are living in a world where people don't want to know the truth. We're living in the world where it's more important to be politically correct than to be honest and truthful. And how, as sovereign multidimensional beings, we reclaim this world is by refusing to play along with that story, and instead fiercely stick to what's true for us and only speak the truth out loud to others. That is how we reclaim our reality, okay, as multidimensional, sovereign human beings. That is how we reclaim it on an everyday, mundane level. Now, as you awaken, the level of truth you're aware of changes. Okay? So that is uncomfortable, but also very necessary. And I'm saying this from very long line of experiences of my own, but also listening to other people of those early generation indigos that, you know, were born in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. This is something that we learned the hard way. And hopefully we've embodied this to a level, okay? We've embodied this to a level where it's not so difficult for you guys. And what this looks like is it's a major crisis of faith. It's when something you get exposed to rocks your world, wakes you up, empowers you beyond belief. And you're like, oh, hell yeah. Oftentimes it looks similar to the guru journey, right? Adapting a guru or taking on the teachings of a guru. And then you reach a point in time where it all comes crashing down around you. You reach a point in time where something gets reflected to you that gives you a crisis of faith. Okay, maybe you wake up to it's a false guru. Maybe you wake up to something that you really thought was the truth, all of a sudden is not the truth. Maybe you wake up to the corruption in the organization you dedicated your life to. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's something didn't work out the way it was supposed to be. Maybe it was a healing crisis and that you thought you were avoiding by having a certain lifestyle. Whatever the rude awakening was, it brought us to a crisis of faith. And that crisis of faith rocked our world like nothing, nobody's business, right? Rocked our world. And it forced us to let go of this outside truth, of this outside authority It forced us to let go of this outside authority and instead have more commitment and courage to reference from within ourselves. And it trained us over many scathing experiences that our inner truth is more important than these outer authorities. And that could be a spiritual tradition. That could be, there's a whole spectrum of things that can be religions, organizations, teachers, all sorts of stuff, right? But what this has done is set the stage for these next generations to really, these collective grids, to allow for these next generations to more easily reference within themselves, to know thyself in a very deep level, where you can take what works from this tradition and rock it, take what works for that tradition and rock it, and all of these things that you are extrapolating from all these different choices are taking you even closer to knowing thyself, taking you even closer to your inner truth at lightning speed. What took an indigo 40 years can happen in 5 years for those in this younger generation. Okay. That is a fruit of our labors, those of us who've been around for many decades. So in that way, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. It's also worth it because we ourselves also become more integral with our being, and we trust ourselves way more than we ever have before.